Hello, and welcome to Women in Business, where we interview entrepreneurs and senior managers and show you the strengths, successes, obstacles, and roadblocks women experience in business. Since I believe every person in business needs to be visible, I'd like to invite you to watch www.sob6, that's the number 6, tips.com, which will give you some valuable information should you get the call to be on radio or TV, which I think is extremely important. If you'd like to contact me personally, drop me a line at Gayle Carson, that's Gayle, Gayle Carson 13 at gmail.com, or go to my website, www.spunkyoldbroad.com, and sign up for my weekly newsletter.
I have a very interesting guest for you today. Her name is LaWana Harris. Drawing from 3 decades of civic activism and 2 decades in the corporate D&I trenches, Harris herself offers leaders, practitioners, coaches, new models that empower everyone from employees to CEOs to do inclusion and address deep-rooted biases that are often invisible. She's a certified diversity executive and an ICF credentialed coach who has created diversity and inclusion awareness programs, cultural competence programs, and overall integrated management solutions. Throughout her career as a global leadership development professional, she's conducted trainings around the world, including the United States, Canada, Europe, Asia, and South Africa. She's the author of Diversity Beyond Lip Service, a coaching guide for challenging bias. LaWana, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Looking forward to hearing more, as well as sharing a little bit about some of the exciting things that are going on in the world of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Well, it's interesting. I think the only continent you missed was Antarctica, but I think it's important to talk about this because there's so much conversation about diversity and now inclusion, and I'm not sure anybody still really understands what all of this means. So let's find out, first of all, what inspired you to write Diversity Beyond Lip Service?
Absolutely. And to your point, that there is a couple things. There's a lot of talk that's been going on about diversity and inclusion for decades. And yet, when we look at the data, even when we look at the lived experience of employees and people in general, we're not seeing the impact as far as the increases in inclusion and even in diversity in some aspects across organizations. So the inspiration for writing Diversity Beyond Lip Service is just that, to see us take practical tools as well as an approach for meaningful action that takes us beyond all the words that are out there circulating in this space and really get to the heart of the matter as to why aren't we moving the needle? What's happening between intent and impact?
I think you have hit the nail right on the head because I think there are maybe there are some that aren't. Of course there are, but most I think organizations and people are generally trying to make this thing work. I don't think they really know what to do. So what is the big elephant in the room when it comes to diversity work?
Oh, great question. And yes, most organizations, honestly, I think you'd be really hard pressed to find an organization that would take a stand and say, I don't believe in diversity and inclusion. And not just from the standpoint of this is something that's good to do or the right thing to do, but it has been shown time and time again, even if you look at data from such great sources such as McKinsey, is shown to be not only good for the organization, for engagement and those types of things, but also for the actual profitability and for the business. And companies that are diverse versus those that are not diverse or have a homogeneous makeup, they actually perform better. And I think the elephant in the room is, honestly, we haven't gotten to the point of radical truth and folks really owning where they are. And that's not singling out any one person or types of people or any of that. It's just more of that we haven't really got to the heart of the matter as to Why are we not having actions aligned to the words as it pertains to D&I? And the truth of the matter is, a lot of organizations have been homogeneous for decades. And now there is a need for some shifts in power. There's a need for some shifts in mindsets. And it's not just at that individual level, it's going to take a systemic approach. So I understand, and everyone knows and believes that it's not going to happen overnight, but we haven't really stepped back to look at what this means for power shifts and also what it means to truly have an inclusive culture in the face of the dominant culture that it exists currently and has existed for years.
So, why do people in positions of privilege or power, I guess they are the CEOs of the world, have such a hard time seeing it?
That's a great question. And in speaking with CEOs, in speaking with clients, organizations, teams, leaders, you name it. And this spans across not only organizations, this is in the academic arena as well as in nonprofits. If you put yourself in the shoes of someone who, and we'll name it, a white man who's been in a boardroom or an executive leadership role for decades. And when he looks to his left, he looks to his right, he's seeing people that look like him. And now, well, even though we've been talking about it for quite a while, we're finding out and discovering that we need to have the presence of women and other aspects of diversity in those rooms for profitability and to sustainability for organizations. So it's hard. It's not anything that any of us, may not have been in that situation, but we can put ourselves in a place of compassion and curiosity. And I like to throw in there humility as well to try to understand what it means for someone who has been in a dominant position of power for, you know, basically throughout existence. And now to have that brought to the fore that we need to open it up and expand this for the better good, for the greater good of all. And just the fact of change, no one really runs into change with open arms. It's going to take us being able to invite white men and the current dynamic to the table with curiosity, humility, and compassion.
So, do you think it's because they just aren't aware? Or do you think, I mean, certainly if they're, walking around in this lifetime, they see the discussions, they see the media, they see the uproar, they see all of this. Are they still in this little fog and in this little, box that they've been in before? I mean, it seems almost impossible if you're existing in the world today to not be aware of all of this.
Yeah, and again, this is N of one, so I preface it with this is my opinion that no, I don't believe there's anyone unless you're, on some remote island without communication to the outer world that is not aware of the dynamic that we have around the needs for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So no, I don't think it's an awareness issue. What I do believe is what to do with the awareness is where we have an opportunity to have some impact. Because I do believe there and have met. In fact, I was just at a conference out the Human Capital Institute. They had an inclusive diversity conference focusing on making diversity and inclusion a part of everyday culture just a few months ago. And actually just last month I think it was, and there was a white man there, an executive leader, and he said during one of the conversations, he said, I want to share power and I'm willing to share power. I don't know how.
Your book is based on a 6-step commit model, and it was written to help people who don't understand how to do this. So tell us a little bit about how it works.
Sure. So I based the commit model with a couple things in mind. One, my own lived experience in and outside of the workplace, and also as a Black woman in corporate America and in the society that we find ourselves in with the current dynamics around race, politics, you name it. And with all of that in mind, I have a global lens as well. So I wanted commit to be something that is universal, meaning it could be used here in the US, it could be used in the Middle East, in Asia, throughout Asia and Europe. And what I found is the dynamics around the needs for diversity and inclusion are very different from when you think of the Western approach versus other parts of the world. So commit is designed to look at the fundamental core common and consistent behaviors that will perpetuate and build a cycle and culture of inclusion. And from that premise, then I also built in some of the how using professional coaching to empower every individual and, quite honestly, every person, every level, and every day throughout organizations to be able to live inclusively as well as to have the how to take those first steps to get started if they're unsure.
Boy, that's fabulous. That's exactly what people need. I'm very curious because I've had the opportunity to speak and consult all over the world. I've worked in 50 countries. What were the main things that you saw as differences between the different cultures, LaWana?
Sure. So when we think about diversity and inclusion, some of the things that stand out first is how we even approach it. With our Western culture, we have a sense of speak your truth, take things on directly, and a no holds barred approach. And then if you travel to Asia and other parts of the world, and it's not, some of it is cultural, but then some of it, quite honestly, is legislative. There are laws of the land where someone here may want to have a pride parade or a pride walk or event, and they're freely open to do that. In other parts of the world, there are laws against that, and the consequences are, unbelievable in our part of the world, but that exists. And because that dynamic exists, there can't be a one and done approach to diversity and inclusion. And having that background, based on my previous position that I left just in December of last year, I was the head of global leadership development and working with leaders all over the world. And having that lens, I understand the importance to know the nuances in different geographic regions, but then also how to take those differences and apply that core common and consistent level, but then layer onto that the individual nuances for implementation across the different areas. So I call that a global approach.
You know, you say that I'm really interested in this. You say that many people use the phrase, I don't see color, but you stress that these words are harmful and minimize others' experiences. So I'm just wondering, can you explain that more?
Sure. So if you were, I just did a workshop up in Victoria, British Columbia with ACTA, which is the Association of Coach Training Organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And I shared a slide that has a young African American man. There's two pictures beside each other. There's a young African American, same young African American man. One, he's in a business suit behind a desk, obviously a senior executive at an organization. He's in his office. And then the other, he's seated in a nice home in a chair, but he has on a hoodie and some shorts, prepared to go work out. And I make the statement that when he wakes up in the morning, he could be going as a CEO to work as a CEO, a senior or executive level in his position. However, if he decides to go for a run in his own neighborhood in the morning before he heads in and he puts on that hoodie, that could be a life or death situation. So when he comes into the office, we don't know if he took a run that morning, whether he was stopped and, potentially could have been harmed, lost his life over a simple decision between taking a run before work simply because of the color of his skin. So when we say we don't see color, that's saying we don't see that individual, because you can't separate. We don't live in a vacuum, and you can't separate out that dire part of an African American man's and many other people of color, their lived experience. We can't say we don't see that and then say we see them.
Well, it's true. I mean, I guess when you describe somebody, you might say he's African American, just like you might say she's blonde. I mean, it's a physical description that you use, or to say that she's Asian, or I don't know, as a derogatory statement, but more as this is the person you look for. However, I was brought up in a community where I went to school with African Americans. I even in college, I was there with them. And in Florida, I was the first school, modeling school, to accept African American students. I didn't know you weren't supposed to. And I didn't know there was a bias there because I had never been brought up with it. So it was kind of interesting to me, and we had a wonderful relationship. As a matter of fact, I used to take my students on these fashion tours of Europe, and she came with me, and we roomed together. She was delightful, and it was just, it was just what it was. So I always have had an curiosity about why diversity is so difficult for people when unfortunately I may have used those words, I don't see color, but
Mhm.
I meant it in a way of, I don't know, everybody's a human being to me. But what types of lip service do you think employees contend with in the workplace?
Great question. And there's many. The forms of lip service, I actually go through a couple very explicitly in the book, where an example of lip service would be, which most organizations are doing, and they have a few people of color, usually one African American, one person of Asian descent, and then they'll have them sprinkled in with some Caucasian or white people, and that is plastered over their marketing for the organization. And at face value, no pun intended, there's really, if that's all they do, that's lip service. Meaning there's a lot of visual representation, there are a lot of friendly words, everyone's welcome here. This is a company where everyone belongs. All those things are there. But then if you get underneath that and you talk to some of the employees through engagement surveys, through focus groups, through networking, and you find that the employees' experience within the company is very different. They're an assimilation culture. There's a very dominant culture that tends to lend to, and this is from quotes from people of color who, and other aspects of diversity, who feel that the norm for success, informal or not, is established around a male dominant culture or a white dominant culture, maybe even able bodied culture for those that are differently able. When you find that the lived experience of their employees doesn't match all of that nice marketing words and visuals, that's lip service. So that would be an example.
And of course, I suppose the powers that be think that they're doing the right thing and think that they're accomplishing what they're supposed to, and they're not. So you talk about um, that many social identities have privilege, though, as a concept. Not just, CEOs. There are many social identity groups that are around. What are a few examples?
Sure. So I, as an African American, I prefer black. So I, as a black woman, also have privilege. I don't have nearly the amount of privilege as a white male, especially a white heterosexual Christian male in America. However, I'm also Christian. So I have a degree of privilege at based on my faith compared to some other faiths. And then I have able body privilege. as compared to some others, as I mentioned, that may be differently abled. And then as a heterosexual woman, I have some privilege associated with that based on the experience of my lesbian, gay, queer, and bisexual brothers and sisters. So when we think about all of those aspects of life and diversity, human diversity, that are not a part of what has been established as the dominant norm, then there's a level of privilege associated with that, and that also brings in to the conversation the word that's thrown around a lot is intersectionality. Now, Kimberly Crenshaw, when she introduced that word intersectionality, she was talking about the African American female experience as it relates to some judicial experiences. However, that concept of intersectionality comes to bear when you think about the different domains of privilege.
I have never even heard of that word, LaWana.
Yes, intersectionality. Kimberly Crenshaw did some wonderful work on that, and again, just playing on that a little bit more. It's like you and I, we're both women. So when we make our connection as being women, we can connect around maybe a male dominant society or workplace and some of the things that we've had to endure, overcome, and maybe some challenges and successes. Then when we bring in intersectionality, I'm a woman, but I'm also African American. So there may be some experience, not maybe, there are some experiences that I've had as a part of my intersectional being as a woman and African American that you haven't. And then I won't use you because I don't know, where you stand, but I may have and a white friend or colleague who is a white woman and experiences a degree of privilege as a white woman, but then she also may be a white woman who's married to a woman and may have some intersectionality play out in her life because of her relationship as a lesbian woman married to another woman.
Wow, there's a lot going on there.
Mhm.
Well,
Absolutely.
you know, your book is something that I think is something that CEOs need to get their hands on, mainly as a model to work from. So we have about 5 minutes left, and I want to make sure that people know how to get a hold of you and where they can get your book. But what would be one piece of advice that you hope readers take from your book, LaWana?
Yeah. I really want us as a people, to really get back to treating each other well. And I know we're busy. I know life pulls on us, and we're more connected usually to these devices we have in our hands and some type of digital experience or social experience. But I really want people to be more connected to each other and to be more curious and approach each other with curiosity and humility. And I think as we do that, we'll find that we have more in common than we do different. And even when we do bump up against differences in those that we interact with, let's approach that with some curiosity and humility and be open to each other as opposed to everyone retreating to their corners to defend their opinion or where they may be in life. And if we can do that, I think organizations that can build that type of a culture within their employees will get the best out of their talent. People will want to work there so that they can develop and attract, develop, and retain talent. And the data already shows that they will be more profitable. And if someone can take the book and the action guide that gives some of the how to and move further closer to that goal, then I will have accomplished why I took the time to write the book.
Fabulous. So where can they reach you, LaWana, and how can they get a hold of your book?
Sure. LaWanaHarris.com, LAWANA. Harris.com is the website, my website, where they can find all of the information and some updates on things I'm doing. And the book is widely available at all major retailers, Amazon, Barnes& Noble, Books A Million, CEO Reads, everywhere that they usually purchase books online. They can find it, and in some of the indie stores as well.
Fantastic. So remember, in order to get a hold of LaWana, you can go to her website, which is LaWana, LaWana Harris, HARRIS.com. You can find her book in any of the major book stores or book sites online. If you are working in a company where you feel that diversity and inclusion is not up to par, maybe you can gift somebody at the top with the book. That might be a good idea. And if you are in business for yourself, then certainly this would be a terrific guideline for you as well. I think this is really, really interesting, LaWana, and I think that your approach to it is quite good. In other words, having not just writing about it, but having a 6-step commit model is like it's a blueprint. It's a blueprint for everybody to take advantage of. So I think that's wonderful. So is there any last thought that you'd like to leave our audience with?
Sure. First, thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it. And I'm just looking forward to, for those that do choose to read the book, if you think it's something that you'd like to implement, of course, get the action guide. And as you begin your journey, this is not the end all be all. This is a starting point. And I expect folks to take it and make it better. And I just want to hear from you how you're using it, any feedback you have, because we're all in this together.
Better words have never been said, LaWana. Thank you so much. We appreciate your contribution. We appreciate your wisdom. And thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to Women in Business. I hope you enjoyed today's show. And if you have any suggestions as to who you'd like me to have as a guest, just email me at gaylecarson13@gmail.com. Be sure to check out www.sob6tips.com. And in the meantime, go to www.spunkyoldbroad.com to see the resources I have for you.